The War of Shadows, Bloodlines, Queens, and the Hidden War for Immortality. Written by Chase B. Gardner. Narrated by Chase B. Gardner. Chapter 1. The Womb of the Empire. The night the palace learned the limits of prayer, the Bosporus lay flat as black glass, and the lamps along the quay shivered in the wind. Beyond the gardens, beyond the cypress and the marble, an old city breathed, unaware that the Empire's heart was listening for a single sound, a newborn's cry. Inside the imperial chambers, the air was thick with incense and crushed herbs. The women of the household moved like ghosts between braziers, basins, and folded linens. Midwives murmured verses under their breath. Physicians hovered at the edges with their hands tucked into their sleeves, as if their fingers might betray them by trying something new. Suleiman stood at the threshold and did not enter. He had conquered cities. He had watched armies break and banners fall. He had signed decrees that sent men into history and out of it. None of it prepared him for the silence that lives between one breath and the next. A cry rose from within, sharp, sudden, hopeful, then cut off as if the world had remembered itself and swallowed its own promise. The midwives shifted, and the chamber's lantern light turned their faces into masks. An elderly physician stepped out, bowed low, and did not lift his eyes. "Padisha," his voice was thin. "The child." Suleiman waited. "The child lives." The man's throat tightened as he forced the rest through. "The mother does not." For a moment, the palace did not change. The stone did not crumble. The banners did not fall. The guards did not shout. The empire did what empires always do. It pretended nothing happened. But something inside Suleiman shifted, some quiet mechanism of belief that had held since boyhood. In the stillness, he saw the bitter ledger hidden beneath all triumph. Kingdoms gained, lives lost, laws written, blood paid, prayers offered, unanswered. He walked into the chamber. The woman lay as if asleep. Her hair spread like ink on the pillow. Her lips were slightly parted, a question she would never finish. A midwife covered the body with the cloth so delicately it looked like an apology. Suleiman did not touch her. He had touched too many things in his life that did not remain his. He looked instead at the newborn, swaddled and red-faced, squirming with the stubbornness of a soul newly arrived. The infant's fist opened and closed, searching for something the world would not provide. Suleiman felt the sharpest of human thoughts, small, shameful, sincere. "I would trade a city for you to breathe again." He turned to the physician. "Why?" The man swallowed. "Childbed fever, hemorrhage, fate." Suleiman's gaze hardened. "Do not hand me fate as if it is a coin." The physician hesitated, then spoke the truth that courtiers never like to offer. "Women die, Padisha. They always have died. Not all, but too many, even here." Even here. Even behind gold and silk and marble, where the world pretended it could purchase safety. Suleiman looked from the mother's still form to the infant's squirming life, and something cold and bright entered his mind, an idea with no mercy. Then he said, very quietly, "Summon the ones who measure the world." They came at night, as if daylight itself might judge them. The court of inquiry gathered in a sealed hall far from the music of the harem. Its doors were guarded not by palace eunuchs, but by janissaries, silent men whose obedience was a blade. A second door waited beyond the first, a third beyond that. Each lock clicked like a prayer answered incorrectly. Inside, the room smelled of iron, ash, and old paper. An Athenor, an alchemical furnace, squatted in the center like an altar, its bricks strained by years of patient flame. Glass retorts and cucurbits caught the lamplight in curved reflections. Brass instruments lay on tables, astrolabes, calipers, compasses. Parchments were spread wide, inked with diagrams that looked half like anatomy and half like constellations. Along the far wall, Someone had written verses in elegant script, holy lines meant to sanctify an unholy appetite for knowledge. Beneath them, in smaller handwriting, were notes in Greek and Arabic, arguments about form and matter, about essence and existence, about what was made and what was born. Suleiman entered, and the men rose as one. These were not the loud kind of wise men. They were the careful kind. Physicians who spoke in symptoms, scholars who spoke in footnotes, alchemists who spoke in symbols and could not decide whether truth was found in scripture or in salt. Suleiman did not invite discussion. He gave them a wound and told them to heal it. "You've seen the numbers," he began. "How many women die in childbirth?" A physician cleared his throat. "It depends on the province, Padish, on the season, on luck." "Give me the truth," Suleiman said. The physician's eyes flicked to the door, as if truth might be punished for entering. Too many. Suleiman nodded once, as if accepting a verdict. "Then you will reduce it." A murmur ran through the group. A jurist in a dark robe shifted his weight. "One cannot," he began. Suleiman's gaze cut to him. "Tell me what cannot be done." The jurist swallowed. "To alter what God has written into flesh, to intervene in the mysteries of generation. This is a dangerous field, Padisha." Suleiman leaned forward just slightly. "You speak as if I'm asking you to challenge God." The jurist did not answer. Suleiman's voice lowered. "I am asking you to challenge death." Silence. Then, from the back, an older alchemist spoke, his hands stained with ink and ash, his eyes too bright for his years. "There are precedents," the alchemist said carefully, "not in the open, not in the sermons, but in the manuscripts that men hide when they still want to sleep at night." Suleiman's expression did not change. "Show me." The alchemist reached into his satchel and produced a thin, worn folio wrapped in cloth. He laid it on the table as if laying down a weapon. When he unfolded it, the ink was cramped and archaic. Diagrams of vessels, notes about blood, heated baths, sealed chambers, and the creation of a form that could hold life before life. A homunculus. The word was not spoken aloud in that room, but it hung there anyway. An ancient dream of making life, of building what nature refused to preserve. Suleiman's fingers hovered above the page, not touching it, as if the idea itself might stain him. "Is it true?" he asked. The physician spoke before the jurist could. "We do not know." Suleiman looked at them, men who measured the world and still called it mystery when it frightened them. "You will find out," he said, "and you will do it quietly." He straightened, and the lantern light turned his face into the face on a coin. Calm, inevitable. "I do not want monsters," he added. "I want mothers to live." The alchemist bowed. "Padisha, the path to such an end is never straight." Suleiman's jaw tightened. "Then make it straight." Weeks passed in the kind of secrecy that turns time into a series of locked doors. The harem still sang, the empire still feasted, the court still argued in daylight about borders and taxes and treaties. But beneath the palace, fire burned, water heated, glass steamed, and parchments multiplied. They tested herbs first, then tinctures, then something older and stranger, mixtures whose recipes were written in a language that seemed to distrust the reader. They argued in circles. Whether the body's form could be reinforced without deforming the soul, and whether a vessel could be improved without changing what it was meant to hold, and whether intention mattered if consequence did not. Suleiman listened, and when the arguments became too comfortable, he broke them. "Does thinking prove existence?" he asked one night, and watched the scholars reach for names and proofs. The physician answered with a tremor in his voice. "Thought proves mind." "And does a mind prove a rightful place in the world?" Suleiman asked. No one spoke. Suleiman's gaze went to the manuscript, to the diagrams of vessels. "If we create something that thinks," he said, "we cannot pretend it is only a tool." The jurist's eyes sharpened. "Then do not create it." Suleiman's mouth tightened. And let women continue to die? The jurist did not answer, because what answer was there? A pure conscience is easier when it is not the one bleeding. Roxalena awoke beneath a veil of white cloth. She did not scream. That was the first thing that unsettled them. Most things that entered the world screamed. Even lambs protested. Even princes arrived furious at the insult of air. But when her eyes opened, there was only a slow, deliberate blink, as if she had been watching for a long time and had simply decided the moment had come to be seen. The alchemist stood behind a screen of gauze, as if their own creation might harm them with a glance. A physician held a basin of water. A midwife's hand shook as she adjusted the cloth over Roxalena's shoulders. Suleiman was present, but not close. The Padisha watched from the shadow of a pillar, unwilling to admit, even to himself, how much he needed this to be holy. Roxalena lifted her hand and stared at it, flexing her fingers as if reading the language of her own body. Her skin was warm, flawless. Her breathing was steady. Then she turned her head slightly, like someone hearing something far away. "Why is the room full of mourning?" she asked. The question was not accusation, it was observation. It landed like a stone dropped into still water, simple, heavy, unavoidable. The midwife made a sound that might have been a prayer or a sob. Suleiman stepped forward one pace, then stopped, as if drawn toward her and warned away at the same time. "You are safe," he said. Roxalena looked at him. Her gaze was not the soft gaze of a supplicant. It was the steady gaze of a creature trying to decide what the world was. "I am awake," she said, as if confirming a premise. "Who called me here?" Suleiman did not answer immediately. He saw in that instant that this was not a doll, not a vessel, not a simple answer to death. Whatever else she was present. He said carefully, "I did." Roxalena's eyes did not widen. There was no gratitude, no fear, no instant devotion, only a quiet calculation. "Then you have power over me," she said. Suleiman felt a heat rise in his throat. "I have responsibility." Roxalena tilted her head, and for a moment she looked strangely like a painting, not yet finished. "Those are not the same," she replied. One of the alchemists flinched at the clarity of it. Suleiman held her gaze. "You were made for life." Roxalena's fingers tightened in the cloth. "Made?" A single word, and the room chilled. Suleiman said, "To spare women suffering, to spare mothers dying." Roxalena watched him, as if watching a man recite a story he wanted to believe. Then she said softly, "If you spare suffering, why do you smell like fire?" No one answered that, because the room did smell like fire, and ash, and something older than ash. They tried to make her calm. They tried to make her compliant. They tried, in the beginning, to treat her like the solution rather than the question. When she entered the harem, she walked among silk and perfume and laughter with the wary grace of a cat in a palace built for dogs. The other concubines, her sisters, her kin by craft rather than blood, drifted through their lives in a narcotic haze of luxury and command. They did what was asked. They enjoyed what was offered. They survived by not thinking too deeply. Roxalena thought anyway. At first, Suleiman believed that was a gift. When her thoughts sharpened into restlessness, his physicians offered remedies. When her eyes stopped reflecting the music and started reflecting the ceiling, his alchemist offered tinctures. And in time, they offered opium. It softened her edges. It lowered her voice. It turned her questions into distant echoes. In the court's logic, it was mercy. But mercy that quiets a mind can become a cage. It dulled her desire too. dulled it not into peace but into distance. The rituals of her role became something she endured as if from far away, watching herself in a mirror that did not match her face. The silk and gold did not comfort her. They only reminded her that she was owned by comfort. And the more she was numbed, the more the acts demanded of her became, strangely, more unbearable. Not because the body could not comply, but because her mind could not pretend it was consent. She began to walk the palace at night when the opium wore thin, tracing corridors like a prisoner measuring the length of her cell. She listened at doors. She watched servants' hands. She learned who spoke too freely and when they thought no one was there. That was how she heard it. A pair of alchemists in a side chamber laughing softly over a basin, talking as if the world were only ingredients. 100 attempts, one murmured, and still the vessel failed. The Padisha would have halted it, the other replied, if he had seen the pile. The pile, the first said with a smirk, as if life is not always a pile. Roxelana stood in the shadow beyond the door and felt something colder than fear take root in her chest. What did you use? The first asked. The other shrugged. What we had, what the place produces. Names, the first insisted. The second sighed. Seed, blood, shell, membrane, the drowned chemistry of the sea, the purity of the young, the work of fire. Roxelana's fingers tightened against the stone. Her breath slowed until it was barely there. Did she know? The first asked. The second laughed. How could she? She awoke clean. That is the cruelty, a clean thing made from filth. Roxelana stepped back before the door could open. She moved like a shadow through a palace that suddenly felt like a tomb with music. That night, she found the two sisters who were closest to her, not because they were clever, but because they had eyes that sometimes looked past the silk, past the jewelry, past the opium pipe, resting like a casual serpent on the edge of pleasure. She did not tell them everything, not yet. She only asked very quietly, Do you ever feel replaceable? One sister blinked, slow and drug-heavy. The other lowered her gaze. Roxelana's voice sharpened just slightly. Do you ever wonder what happens to the ones who fail? No one answered. Because everyone in that place knew, in some deep, wordless place, that failures did not remain visible. Roxelana leaned closer. If I told you there is a door out, would you walk through it? The sisters looked at each other like children offered a forbidden fruit. Then one nodded, then the other. And Roxelana felt, strangely, no triumph, only the beginning of something heavy. Suleiman did not regret his work while it served him. He regretted it when it stopped serving him. The escape was not traumatic. There was no chase through torchlit corridors, no shouted alarms that woke the palace like thunder. It was quieter than that. Quiet like theft, like betrayal, like a prayer that does not want to be heard. 3 women vanished into the night. In the morning, when the absence reached the Sultan's chamber, Suleiman's face did not change. Only the room around him seemed to shrink. They have fled, the chief eunuch said. Suleiman's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. How? Bribery, the eunuch admitted. A distracted guard, a door left unsealed. Suleiman stared at the floor as if the stone might confess. The empire had many enemies. He had never feared them like this. Find them, he said, and the command was not imperial. It was personal. Where would they go? The eunuch asked. Suleiman's jaw clenched. Wherever men are weakest. And in the privacy of his own mind, he heard the truth he would never speak aloud. I have made a creature with a mind, and I cannot command it. That was regret. Not for the dead behind the locked doors, not for the boundaries crossed, not for the holy lines used as wallpaper. Regret for losing control. Outside, the Bosporus continued to breathe. The palace continued to sing. and far to the west, beneath stone streets that remembered older blood, a tunnel waited like an open mouth.